Hey there. You ever wonder what being an old-timey executioner would be like? No? Well, shit, I'm gonna tell you anyway. This might be what you think of when I say executioner. Well, that's wrong. You're wrong. You naive simpleton. Despite portrayals in modern media, executioners were rarely these black-hooded figures. Hoods were really only used if an executioner wanted to remain anonymous. However, that was almost impossible because if you were an executioner, chances are everybody knew who you were. Many executioners were forced to take on a professional and somewhat solitary lifestyle. But on the upside, and this is a big but, they did get to wear cool shit. Truly, starkly contrasting our preconceived notions of the black-robed executioner, they were, in reality, the envy of ancient fashion circles. In fact, it is of my opinion that much of today's modern fashion can be traced back to the garb of executioners. But in all seriousness, being an executioner sucked. It really sucked. No one wanted to be your friend, people associated you with death, and, to be honest, the clothes made you look like someone who had walked through an art studio and meandered into a couple buckets of paint. So at this point, you may be wondering who would actually want to become an executioner. It's not like the pay was amazing or anything. And I think that question is best answered with a story. The story of Franz Schmidt. Franz's father was named Heinrich, and he was a lumberjack. He was pretty good at it. Every day it was chop, 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 chop. One day, this guy named Albert II rolls up in his horse, and this guy is an asshole, but a huge asshole. Even his horse is an asshole. So he tells Heinrich, "Hey, you're pretty good at chopping wood." And Heinrich's like, "Well, thanks. Thank you. Well, then you'll have no problem chopping the heads off these three criminals." But it was a problem for Heinrich. It was a huge problem. At this point, Heinrich was pretty much screwed. He had no choice but to act as the executioner, as Albert II was a local tyrannical dictator in need of a swift execution while passing through his town. After Heinrich executed the three criminals as he was commanded, he could no longer sell wood. He soon lost all social standing within the local area and was greatly dishonored. So, Heinrich did the only logical thing: become a professional executioner. Heinrich would prove himself valuable to local law enforcement in the coming years, performing many successful public executions. It's important to understand that execution was as much of a show as it was capital punishment. A good public executioner could entertain and strike fear into the hearts of criminals. The clothing that actual executioners wore was often part of the show and helped entertain the audience. It's interesting that despite the vital role executioners played in the beginning of the modern era, they were shunned by those around them. In addition to many parts of Europe, this negative outlook towards executioners extended to the Middle East and Asia. Nearly all executioners were forced to endure social isolation, including their families. Resultantly, the son of an executioner really had no choice but to become an executioner himself. It is on this note that we join Heinrich Schmidt's son, Franz. He sat diligently on the sidelines as he watched his father perform execution after execution, learning his craft. A father who does not arrange for his son to receive the best education at the earliest age is neither a man himself nor has any fellowship with human nature. Desiderius Erasmus, Dutch philosopher, on the education of children, 1529. As Franz developed, he began to assist his father in some ways. Due to their standing in society, it seemed Franz's father was likely the only friend he had. The Schmidts were probably reminded of their social standing nearly every day, but it must have been especially painful on days of public procession or celebration, as they too were excluded from these events. One can really only imagine the psychological effect this had on Franz as a young child. His father, impressing on him since an early age, would tell Franz the story of how they'd lost everything: their ability to make an honest living, friends, their honor. But this story would not fill Franz with hatred or self-pity. Instead, it gave him conviction. His understanding of personal honor would evolve throughout his lifetime, but one thing remained constant: an unshaken conviction to make the best of his terrible beginning, to prove to everyone who disrespected him and his father that they were wrong. He resolved to restore his honor not by abandoning his life and identity, but instead by embracing it, by becoming one of the most respected, wealthy, and feared executioners in all of history. This is the story of Franz Schmidt. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe and share with your friends. I'm just getting started out here on YouTube, so it would be a huge help. Um, That's all I wanted to say. You guys have a good day/night.